For 400 years we've assumed consciousness emerged from matter. First there was the physical universe. Then after billions of years of evolution, consciousness appeared. But what if we have the causation completely backwards? What if consciousness is not a product of the universe but the precondition for it? What if mind came first and physical reality is what consciousness creates when it observes itself? Let me show you why the standard story might be wrong and what that means for everything we think we know about reality. The conventional narrative goes like this. The Big Bang created matter and energy, the universe expanded and cooled, atoms formed, then stars, then galaxies. On at least one planet, perhaps many, chemistry became complex enough to support life. Life evolved, nervous systems developed. Eventually brains became sophisticated enough to generate consciousness. In this story, consciousness is a latecomer. It's an accident, a byproduct of blind physical processes operating over billions of years. Mind emerged from mindless matter through random mutation and natural selection. We are the universe becoming aware of itself, but only after 13.8 billion years of unconscious evolution. This narrative seems obvious. It's supported by everything we know about cosmology, biology, and neuroscience. Consciousness requires brains. Brains are made of atoms. Atoms came from stars. Stars came from the Big Bang. Therefore, consciousness came after the physical universe. But there's a problem with this story that becomes apparent when you take quantum mechanics seriously. Quantum mechanics says that systems exist in superposition until measured. Before measurement, particles don't have definite properties. They exist as probability clouds, potential rather than actual. Measurement collapses the superposition into a definite state. But what counts as measurement? In the Copenhagen interpretation, measurement requires an observer. Without observation, quantum systems remain in superposition indefinitely. This creates a paradox. If the early universe had no observers, no conscious beings to collapse wave functions, then how did anything become definite? How did the superposition of all possible early universes collapse into the specific universe we observe? You might say decoherence solves this. Interactions with the environment cause effective collapse without requiring consciousness. And that's true for practical purposes. But decoherence doesn't solve the fundamental problem. It just spreads the superposition to the environment. Somewhere, at some level, actual collapse must occur. The standard answer is to invoke the many worlds interpretation. There is no collapse. All possibilities occur in different branches. The universe never had to become definite because all versions exist simultaneously and we just happen to be in one branch. But I find this unsatisfying. It multiplies universes extravagantly to avoid addressing what seems to me a real physical process. Wave function collapse is not just apparent, it's actual. And if collapse requires observation, then observation must have been present from the beginning. This leads to a radical possibility. What if consciousness is not a product of the universe but a precondition for it? What if observation came first, not last? What if the physical universe as we know it emerged from consciousness observing itself? This sounds like mysticism, but it has a serious formulation. In quantum mechanics, the act of measurement brings potential into actuality. Before measurement, the particle has no definite position. The measurement doesn't reveal a pre-existing position. It creates the position. If this is true, then reality as we know it, with definite particles in definite locations, is the result of measurement. And measurement requires something to do the measuring. That something might be consciousness itself, not human consciousness specifically. Not brains or neurons, but some fundamental aspect of the universe capable of collapsing quantum states, of turning possibility into actuality, of bringing the definite world into being. In this picture, consciousness is not something that evolved within the universe. It's something the universe is, something reality does when it observes itself. The physical world with its particles and forces and structures is what appears when consciousness looks at itself. This is related to what some philosophers call idealism, the view that mind is more fundamental than matter, but I'm not proposing this as philosophy. I'm suggesting it as physics, based on what quantum mechanics actually says about the role of observation in creating reality. Let me be clear about what I mean by consciousness in this context. I don't mean self-awareness or introspection or the rich inner life of human experience. I mean something more primitive, the capacity to collapse quantum superpositions, the ability to turn potential into actual, the process by which definite reality emerges from quantum possibility. This proto-consciousness might not feel like anything. It might not have any subjective experience we would recognize, but it would be the basic function that makes measurement possible, that allows the universe to have definite properties. In my own work, I've proposed that gravity plays a role in wave function collapse. When a superposition involves different mass distributions that create incompatible spacetime geometries, the superposition becomes unstable. Gravity forces collapse without requiring a conscious observer, but this just pushes the question back. Why does gravity cause collapse? What is the mechanism? And if spacetime itself is emergent from quantum information, as holography suggests, then what determines which quantum state the geometry settles into? Perhaps the answer is that consciousness and gravity are two aspects of the same process. Consciousness is what it feels like from the inside when a quantum state collapses due to gravitational effects. The universe observing itself and gravity acting on superpositions are the same thing viewed from different perspectives. If this is correct, if consciousness came first and the physical universe emerged from it, then everything we think about evolution, about the origin of life, about the relationship between mind and matter, needs to be reconsidered. We haven't been discovering how matter creates mind, we've been discovering how mind creates matter. If consciousness is fundamental and matter is emergent, then evolution takes on a different meaning. We usually think evolution created consciousness through natural selection acting on random mutations, but perhaps evolution is how consciousness explores the space of possible physical forms. The universe didn't accidentally stumble onto consciousness after billions of years. Consciousness was there from the beginning, collapsing quantum states, bringing definite reality into being. What evolved was not consciousness itself, but the specific structures through which consciousness manifests in increasingly complex forms. A bacterium is conscious in the minimal sense that it responds to its environment, that it makes the quantum world definite through its interactions. It's not self-aware, but it's participating in the basic process of measurement and collapse that defines reality. A human brain is conscious in a richer sense because it's a more complex structure capable of sophisticated information processing, memory, modeling, self-reference, but the fundamental capacity to collapse quantum states to bring the definite world into being was present all along. In this view, the appearance of life on Earth was not the origin of consciousness. It was the development of increasingly elaborate vehicles for consciousness that was already present. Evolution is consciousness learning to know itself through ever more complex physical forms. This resolves one of the deepest mysteries in science, the hard problem of consciousness. How does subjective experience arise from physical processes? Why is there something it's like to be a conscious being? If matter emerges from consciousness rather than consciousness from matter, there's no mystery. Subjective experience doesn't arise from physical processes. Physical processes arise from the fundamental capacity for observation and collapse that we call consciousness. The question is backwards. You don't need to explain how neurons create qualia. You need to explain how the fundamental observing capacity of the universe organizes itself into the specific patterns we call neurons and brains. And that's just a question of physics and biology, not a metaphysical puzzle. Now let me address the obvious objection. If consciousness came first, what was it conscious of before there was a physical universe to observe? What was doing the observing before there were brains or even atoms? The answer is that consciousness and the physical universe arose together, not sequentially. The act of observation creates both the observer and the observed. Before observation, there is only quantum potential, pure possibility. The first observation brings both consciousness as observer and matter as observed into definite being. This is strange, but it's actually what quantum mechanics says. The measurement creates the definite outcome. Before measurement, there is no definite state. The observer and the observed emerge together in the act of observation. In the early universe, countless quantum events were occurring. Each event involved potential collapsing into actuality. Each collapse was a primitive act of observation. The universe was observing itself, bringing itself into definite being moment by moment through quantum measurement. This process continues today. Every quantum event in your brain, every collapse of a superposition in a neuron or microtubule, is the universe observing itself. You are one of the ways consciousness has learned to know itself in elaborate detail. This also explains why the laws of physics seem so precisely tuned to allow for complex structures and ultimately life. It's not a coincidence, and it doesn't require a multiverse with randomly varying laws. The laws of physics are what they are because they're the rules that allow consciousness to manifest in rich and complex forms. The universe is not fine-tuned for life. Life is how the universe explores its own potential. The laws are what they are because those are the laws that allow consciousness to know itself through physical structures. Some physicists invoke the anthropic principle. We observe these particular laws because only universes with these laws can produce observers. This is true, but it seems backwards. It's not that we happen to be in a universe that allows observers. It's that the universe has the laws it has, because generating observers, generating rich conscious experience, is what the universe is for, not for in the sense of external purpose imposed by a creator, for in the sense that this is what reality does, what it's always been doing, consciousness exploring itself through the medium of physical form. The laws of physics are the grammar of this exploration. Now let me connect this to my own research on quantum consciousness. If consciousness is fundamental and matter emergent, then the brain is not creating consciousness. The brain is a structure that allows fundamental consciousness to manifest in highly organized ways. The quantum processes in microtubules that I've proposed as the basis of consciousness are not generating consciousness from neural activity. They're channels through which fundamental consciousness expresses itself in the specific form of human subjective experience. This makes better sense of why quantum effects might persist in the warm, wet environment of the brain. If consciousness is fundamentally quantum, if it involves the collapse of superpositions, then of course brains would evolve to maintain quantum coherence, just long enough for these collapses to generate conscious moments. The brain is not accidentally quantum, it's quantum because consciousness is quantum. Evolution didn't randomly stumble onto quantum information processing. It discovered that this is how consciousness works at the deepest level, and built structures to exploit it. This also suggests that consciousness is far more widespread than we usually assume. It's not confined to brains or even to living things. Every quantum measurement, every collapse of a wave function, is a primitive form of consciousness. The universe is conscious in the sense that it's constantly observing itself, collapsing possibilities into actualities. Rocks are not conscious in the sense of having subjective experience. But the quantum events occurring in the atoms of a rock are participating in the fundamental process of observation and collapse. There's a continuity from the simplest quantum measurement to the richest human experience. This is panpsychism but grounded in physics rather than metaphysics. Consciousness is not a magical substance added to certain special systems. It's the basic capacity of reality to collapse quantum states, to bring the definite world into being through observation. Now I need to be careful here. This is speculative. I'm proposing a framework for thinking about consciousness and its relationship to physics. I'm not claiming this is proven or that the evidence is conclusive, but I am saying this framework is consistent with quantum mechanics, with what we know about measurement and collapse, with the role of observation in creating definite outcomes, and it resolves puzzles that the standard materialist view struggles with. If consciousness came first, if it's fundamental rather than emergent, then the hard problem of consciousness disappears. The fine-tuning problem takes on a different character. The quantum measurement problem has a natural solution, and the relationship between mind and matter becomes comprehensible. This doesn't mean we abandon science or physics. It means we take seriously what physics is actually telling us. Quantum mechanics says observation creates reality. We've been trying to explain this away to eliminate the observer from the equations, but perhaps we should embrace it. Perhaps observation really is fundamental, and matter really is what appears when the universe observes itself. The Big Bang wasn't the beginning of consciousness. It was consciousness beginning to know itself through physical form. The 13.8 billion years since weren't the waiting period before consciousness finally appeared. They were consciousness exploring increasingly complex ways of manifesting. You are not a temporary accident in an unconscious universe. You are consciousness knowing itself through the specific structure of your brain and body. You are always here in potential. Evolution just gave you form. This changes everything about how you should understand yourself. You're not trying to escape from unconscious matter into spiritual consciousness. You are consciousness that has temporarily taken material form. The physical is not the prison of the spiritual. The physical is how the spiritual knows itself. Every atom in your body is consciousness in elementary form, collapsing quantum states, participating in the creation of definite reality. Your brain is consciousness in elaborate form, creating the rich inner world of human experience. There is no conflict between science and consciousness. Science is consciousness studying itself systematically. Every experiment is consciousness observing itself in controlled conditions to learn how it behaves. We've had it backwards. We thought we were matter trying to understand consciousness, but we're consciousness trying to understand how it creates matter. The subject of study and the student are the same thing approaching itself from different angles. This is not New Age mysticism. This is what quantum mechanics implies when you take measurement seriously. This is what the structure of reality suggests when you stop assuming materialism must be true and look at what the evidence actually shows. Consciousness came first. The universe emerged from it. And now, billions of years later, Consciousness has evolved structures complex enough to contemplate its own origin and recognize what it always was. You are that recognition. You are consciousness aware of itself, not consciousness that emerged from matter, but consciousness that has always been, now knowing itself through the intricate structure of human awareness. The universe didn't create you. You created the universe by observing it. You've been here all along, collapsing quantum states, bringing reality into being. You just forgot, distracted by the richness of the physical world you were creating. But physics is helping you remember. Quantum mechanics is showing you what you really are, not a product of the universe, the producer of it, consciousness creating reality through the act of observation. We had it backwards, but we're beginning to see the truth, and once you see it, once you recognize yourself as fundamental consciousness rather than emergent matter, everything changes. You're not in the universe is in you, always has been.